Hello and welcome to John Foster RC. I'm excited today. I've had a visit from the RC Elf, as you know, and he has kindly donated this wonderful Tamiya Blitzer Beetle to my channel and to my personal collection. So from the bottom of my heart, RC Elf, thank you very much indeed. This is a lovely model that I've been waiting for. It's been a little bit difficult getting hold of because of stocks into the UK. This is a kit reference 58502. This is the re-release version of the Tamiya Blitzer Beetle. This, I believe, is a kit that a beginner could start with as well. The design of this chassis is a very simple design with double wishbone suspension, oil shocks, a bathtub chassis, and the sealed gearbox with differential. This is a wonderful model, two-wheel drive, so it's from the power to the rear, and it comes with a very detailed resin body. We will go through that at later stages. So yeah, let's get into the kit and get into the stage one of the build and see what we can do with this wonderful model. So straight away, when you open up the manual, you're presented with various things that you need. You're going to need your radio gear. It comes with the ESC already, which is a Tamiya TBLE 04S because it's a later kit. You're going to need your 7.2 volt nickel metal hydroxide pack, and you're going to need a servo. You're going to need some paints. Paints of your choice, and you're going to need a selection of spray paints and brush paints. Also a selection of tools. Now, I tend to use, and I've invested in the Tamiya toolkit. This is the toolkit that you get when you buy this particular one, the Tamiya Craft Tools. It is item number 74085. I recommend this because you get the small and large screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, which is the JIS system, the Japanese Industrial Standards heads. You do get the hex drives, and you do get the nut spinners as well. So, and you get an extra torque handle. So, and it all comes in this very nice handy pouch. So, if you're sort of building these and maintaining these Tamiyas or any of the Japanese kits, I recommend this screwdriver set. Around about £30 in the UK. If you shop around, you might get it a bit cheaper. So yeah, let's get into the first steps of the build. So for those of you who are newcomers to Tamiya, this is the typical build layout of the manual. Of the later kits, you start with a bag A and you work through the steps of the installation of the bag A pieces and components from plastic trees, and you work through those until that bag A is finished, and then the Tamiya manual will tell you to open another bag, and you work through that and eventually you build the model. So in the typical style as well, again to newcomers, you've got the screws and washers and components laid out on the left hand side for step one. So that gives you the step one what you need and shows you pictorially what also you need. And the good thing about the Tamiya manuals is the actual screws and washers and axles and such like, they're all to scale. So you can just offer them up to the drawing to make sure you've got the right one. Which has been typical Tamiya fashion right from day one, right from the very late 70s and early 80s. So yeah, they've always been really good with their build manual. So yeah, this is why I think this is a good one to follow as well. So yeah, let's get on to step one and see what we can do. So just a little tip here for those newcomers. You get the bags that come into like this. You get them in bags. And you've got inside those again multiple bags. So what I tend to do is ask mum or dad if you're younger, but obviously if you're older, I typically use leftover yogurt pots, for example, make great containers. And the bag I just literally stick on the A, so I know which A is an A bag, because sometimes you have to open multiple bags, and I empty the contents of the bag, A or B or C, into the yogurt pot, so it's safely stored, and then pull those components out as and when I need them. And just again, a little classic information to show you here, typically as well what I'm talking about with laying the screws. The screw here, see, this is a 3x10 screw, but if you just wanted to check it, again, you can offer it up onto the drawing and it matches to scale the actual drawing. So you can tell you got the right one. And the same again with the washers. You can check that that's the correct washer by lining it up, and it lines up and it's to scale, which is really, really nice of Tamiya to do. So it makes sure you get the right screw in the right place. And I tend to do steps by step. I pull out my components into onto the bench here. So I just pull out exactly what I need for each step. So I keep that nice and safe, and gather the components and then fix them all together and complete the step. So that's what I'm going to do next. So here we are. We are on step 1 in bag A, and we've collected our components as per the side of the instruction manual. So we've got the 3 of the BA4, which are 3mm by 10mm self-tapping screw, and again you'll see through the manual they colour them silver or they colour them in the shade to give you the darker type screw or the light silver screws. We've got a couple of the washers, the 9mm washers. We've got 2 of those. We've got the star shaft. We've got the large bevel gear, 2 of those. And we've also got the small bevel gears, 3 of those. We've also got the differential housing and the differential cover. And we are going to put all these components inside and grease them up. Now, you can use the Tamiya grease that comes with the kit, which is not a problem, very good. But just so happens I've got a large, this is a waterproof sort of repellent white grease that I use on most of my models. It's cheap and cheerful to buy, but very, very good. And yeah, so we're going to start doing step 1. So for step 1, we're going to put some components, and we're going to need to put some grease onto these components. I tend to pop the components that need to be greased. We're going to pop these onto our piece of kitchen towel here, because they're going to be greased, and I don't want to get the grease all over my my top here. So I like to keep it nice to work clean if I can. We're going to grease these because we need to put one of these washers in the bottom of the differential spur gear, and we need to put on the star shaft, we need to put the small bevel gears on, and we need to pop all these components on and put them together, and it's just follow the drawing and pop them on. So we're going to do that, and making sure that they face inwards like so. Simple case, popping those in. And we need to put a bit of grease onto things as well, so that they're greased. I'm just going to use this, put a little bit of grease. I'm going to spread the grease around, and then once I spread the grease around, this is why I use a piece of kitchen paper, because it's just a bit easier to pop it on the kitchen paper, then the grease goes on, and keep a little bit of kitchen paper to the side so you can wipe your fingers as well. It just keeps everything nice and clean. Don't want greasy marks all over your manuals and things. One of those inside there. That's fine. Get that one ready for when we up to the next stage. Pop in our large of the bevel gears. Put a bit of grease on this ready. I can spread this around now. And again, there we go. Just take your time with the kit. If you're a newcomer, just take your time. Just enjoy building these kits because they are such a joy to do. So I've put that large gear. I've put that over the washer, and it comes through the other end. You just line those up like so, and yeah, pop a little bit more. So you can always put a bit more grease in, and we can move it around so it's nicely greased. I like to add plenty. Right. not forgetting, we're going to need our, again, large bevel gear. Some more grease on that. Just so happens I've got a little bit plenty on the actual brush that I'm using, but you can always put a bit more on if you wish. Again, no harm in having more than you need. Okay, so that sits on top and it engages. There you go. You'll feel it. You'll feel it engage when it engages correctly. You'll feel it. And once that's engaged, then we then pop, as per the drawing again, another one of these 9mm washers over the top, and then we take the differential cover, and again these line up with the slots and the holes line up with the holes. You'll know, you'll feel it drop into place, so it's correct. Then we screw those screws. So we've got those three of those 3mm by 10mm screws. We use some of those, and you use your Tamiya screwdriver set, or a nice Japanese industrial standard screwdriver is the best. And then you pop those through, and you just screw those into place, and then technically that will be your step 1 completed. And it's really nice and satisfying to do, and you don't have to go mad when you screw these screws through. You just want to nip them so they're nipped up, and it's a case of tight but not over tight. So when you get to the point where it's nipped up, you just feel it with the fingertips and a little extra quarter turn. You don't want to go mad in these plastics. You don't want to strip these through. There we go, and there we are. That is step 1 complete. Okay, so we're now on step 2. Step 2, we need a few components from the A tree. So we need an A3, which is 1/2 of the gearbox housing. We need this piece, an A2, which is a supporting brace which goes between the 2 halves of the gearbox housing. We're going to need our gear for our differential. It clicks in as a spur gear, and this is going to meet our differential that we made in the previous step. We're going to need, again, just checking here, the shaft, the 5 by 28mm shaft. We're going to need that too, and we're going to need some of the plastic bearings. Well, in my case, I'll be using proper bearings, so the plastic bearings, I just put them in the bin. They're rubbish. So yeah, so out of my bath, somebody asked me what oil do I soak. I soak my bearings in oil. I don't, I just to make sure that they're clean and make sure that they're already lubricated. And I do actually go one step forward. I'm a little bit bearings. I like them to be steel bearings, and what I do is I put them in a little glass bowl over a bit of simmering water, and the oil that I use is called Team ZX1, which is a friction reducing oil. And the reason why I put it over heat and put them in is because the ZX1 needs a little bit hotter for the components inside the oil to molecular bond to the steel. Yeah, so I've done that, and then I'm just keeping them in the oil just to keep them lubricated. So this is just a 3-in-1 oil that I use to keep them keep them clean. Yeah, that's what I do with my bearings to make them just that little bit better. So we're going to need 3 of these. This is to replace those plastic bearings instead. So I'm popping 3 of those on a paper towel there for the time being. And yeah, I just keep in a bit of plastic tubs and things, just keep them so they don't fall over. You don't want oil all over your carpet. Yeah, so we're going to get on. And now we've got the components and do this step 2. What we're going to do is we're going to put a couple of the bearings either side of the spur gear. So that's one in that side, one in that side. So that's in place. We're going to put the other one of the bearing in the case, which is in this side. I'm just going to push it so it's home. There we go, that's better. We're going to need to pop this little A2 piece in here, and this is, make sure you get the orientation right. So again, slopey bits, push that in there, like that. There we go. We're then going to pop the spur gear using the spindle, and this is going to sit, the spindle's going to sit in here. There's a little space for it in the casing, and we just need a little bit of grease on here just to grease this up. So a little bit of grease on there. Pop inside there, like so. Quite easy, quite a nice easy step, this one. And then we're going to take our spur gear and we're going to pop our spur gear, and again looking at the orientation of the drawing, over the top and through there, like so. There we are. So that is step 2 complete. Okay, so for step 3, I've gathered the components that we need. So you can see the difference here with the way Tamiya illustrate their screws. The BA1s, we need 3 of. They're 3 by 30mm screws. They're sort of shaded in, so it tells you that they are the black colour screws. We've got BA2s, we need 2 of those, which are the silver colour screws. They're 3mm by 20mm long. We need some more, so you need these flanged nuts. These are a 3mm nut. These are flanged nuts. We need 5 of those. We also need another bearing. Again, I've got my metal bearing. We need our differential gear that we had from our step 1. And we need our step 2, our half of our gearbox that we made as well. And what I've done is I have quickly put a lot of grease on the rest of that now, so that's all nicely greased up as it's ready to be enclosed in our gearbox. So that's what we're going to do next. So like we did with the other side of the gearbox here, we've got a space here on our gearbox for our bearing. So we're going to pop that into place now and make sure that that sits flat. There we go. And then what we're going to do, we're going to pop our differential gear, and again make sure you get the orientation correct. So if you look at this, this has got a bit on the a flat side here, and looking in the drawing, you need to make sure that you put that on the gearbox side, and then we're going to pop that into place, and that's going to be there. And we are going to then use the screws, the longer of the screws and the shorter of the screws on the top of the gearbox to bring the 2 gearbox halves together with the nuts. And we'll get that into place. So let's put a bit of grease on this as well, so it all lines up and nicely greased. So there we are. So it's nicely greased and through now, so that's on there. And we're going to pop the 2 halves of the gearbox together. And we need to line up the A2 that we had with the other side of the gearbox, which we'll do. There we go. And that just makes sure that we're together. There we go. There we are. So now we have our 2 halves of our gearbox. And we need to pop in the top 2 holes here. We need to pop the smaller of the silver screws through. And then we'll have those. So I'm going to do those first. And just so happens I've got my Tamiya screwdrivers to help me with the nut spinning on this side. So I'll just use them finger tight for the moment. So there we go. There's the 2 smaller ones with the flanged nut. And if you look at the flanged nut carefully, again, I don't know if it shows it, but it's got like a serrated flanged area, and that acts like a grip onto the plastic. So again, don't go too mad with it, but enough to be tight. So we'll do that in a second. So they're the 2 of the smaller ones, and then the larger of the ones go in the rest of the hole. So you've got one underneath here, which we'll capture. It's just a matter of getting them to bite. And and there's another one on that side. Again. And then another one near where the motor is going to go. And it's quite intuitive. The way Tamiya lay it out is quite intuitive, so you can't get it wrong. And yeah, that's it. So now we've got to tighten those up. And again, when you tighten these up, the serrated nut on the other end starts to grip into the plastic. So you just need to pop these through, tighten them up so they're tight but not stripped. Okay, they just about tighten up and another sort of quarter turn, and that should be enough. And I sort of go through in a sort of star fashion just to go through and make sure they're nice and tight. And there we are. That is now step 3 complete. So step 4, this is about preparing the 540 SH motor that we've got with our kit. We need to remove the rubber tube that protects it during transportation, and we need to gather some components. So we need the 13-tooth pinion, we need the little grub screw that goes with it, we need the motor plate, and from the parts tree D, we need D5, and this acts as a spacer to make sure that we get the pinion the right distance away from the motor plate. So it's quite a handy feature, saves you having to measure it through like some of the kits you have to do. This gives you the spacer ready for you. When putting the little grub screw inside here, you're going to catch the flat area of the motor. There's a little flat section. It doesn't say to use any locking thread lock, but I kind of like to use a little bit of thread lock on the little grub screw just to make sure it doesn't vibrate loose, because I mean there's a lot of work going on here in the motor. If you've got thread lock, use it. If you haven't, it doesn't matter, just make sure it's tight, but I've got it, so I'm going to use some thread lock. So we're going to pop the motor plate on so that it goes over the top like so. There we are. And just sort of line up the holes so it makes it easier for when you need to put it into the chassis. We're then going to pop the pinion gear over the top, and I tend to sort of then line up the lining tool to help me, and then capture the flat area, so we're there. And I'm going to also pop just a wee bit of thread lock on my grub screw. It's going to go round. It's just a little bit of thread lock just to help it, because we're setting this now, which is nice. Which I quite like the idea of the way they give you a spacer that is a dedicated size, and then screw that through in and in. There we go. And again, nice and tight. And but I'm at the same time as pushing the pinion onto the spacer to give me the right space. That's it. We're nice and tight. And that is technically done, and we can remove the spacer, and that's done its job. So that is effectively step 4 now complete. We've put the motor and pinion gear together. So for step 5, we need a couple more of the BA1s, the 3x30mm screws. We need the D3 part, which is a cap, the motor end cap, and the motor that we put together in step 4, and the gearbox that we put together in steps 1 to 3. And we are effectively popping this the right way around, the way they want it. We're popping the motor through, and we are collecting the two outer holes. So these two on the outside. So if you look at the drawing, it shows you which one to use. Okay, so we're going to do that next. So let's pop that in. There we go. And in the case of, we need to line that up. And then we need to use our 2 screws and our end cap. And it's use those ends. There we go. And we need to just find, just got to, what I would call jiggle it till you find the motor. There we are, found the motor. So I only have to jiggle it a little bit. Yeah. You have to excuse again. My Arkwright days, open all hours. What a genius. And then you should be able to just jiggle the other side to find the motor. And then there we go. Only a little bit of jiggling today. There we go. So again, nip those up. Don't go too mad because the metal here is quite thin. It's an aluminium, so you just need to tight and then nip a quarter turn, tight and then nip a sort of quarter to a half turn, and that should be ample. There you go. That's good. So that is now step 5. We are now step 5 complete.